Okay, let's see here. You probably only have a couple minutes left, huh?
No,
So
no, no. I sent you a message in Discord. We can finish. We can
we can
finish.
finish. All right, sweet, sweet, sweet. Okay, what team should we go to next? Should we keep going in order, or should we go to one of your
Go
teams?
back.
You
Let's
want
go
to go
back
back?
for now. Let's
Okay,
go back to Golden State.
okay. Let's go to the Bay Area. Let's go to the Warriors. Obviously, championship team. You could say that they have a game-changing offseason. Let me go to their roster. So this is what they signed in free agency. They obviously got Dante DiVincenzo. Actually, not a bad pickup. They got Patrick Baldwin Jr., who I like. I think he's going to be a solid guy for them. Rui Santos obviously showed out in the summer league. We'll see if he is a two-way guy where he just plays on the G League. Their losses though were Damian Lee, Gary Payton II, Otto Porter Jr., and Juan Toscano Anderson. So for their offseason, I think I would have to rate it a pretty solid offseason. Because I think, and we could talk about this as well. We can talk about the Draymond Green contract extension situation. A lot of people are wondering, is he going to get that? Because that's what he wants. He wants a max contract extension with the Golden State Warriors. And the question now becomes for the Golden State Warriors moving forward. And obviously, the owner, not a huge fan of wanting to pay the luxury tax. Seems like they're trying to close that down, trying to close that window of spending that much money. I think this is the Warriors. I think next year is the last chance for the Golden State Warriors to win another championship before the owner decides to shut it all down. And so I
Or
think they
just
need,
go with the youth movement in general.
yeah, just go youth and say, okay, look, I love you, Draymond. I love you, Clay. Well, more so Draymond, I think, but I don't think we're going to give you a contract extension because we're looking to kind of go to the next chapter in our NBA ownership career. So I think it's a solid offseason in terms of what they did for now. The question for them now becomes in the future for me. Like what moves do they make? Do they sign these guys? I mean, what's your take on it? I know I've been taking up the room a little bit too much, but what's your take on them?
Oh, man, I know I keep saying this for a lot of them, but I think that this one's kind of tough too because I think they lost a lot of the things that made them a special team last season. I shouldn't say that. That's overstating it. Let's go. I think they might be the new top of solid just because you have to put them there, like inherently
Yeah.
because of winning the championship.
True, true, true.
Um, Start with the good things. I like DiVincenzo for this team. I like
Yeah.
what he brings. I think he fits into the scheme really well. He's a nice like imitation of their offense when they're off the court in Steph and Clay, right? Just a 3-point. And DiVincenzo honestly is a little underrated. He's been kind of important when he's been healthy for the teams he's been on. The thing I actually really liked for this team was that I really like that Patrick Baldwin Jr. up in the draft, just where they got him, the pedigree of him as a player. Like he was like a top 5 recruit coming out of high school, wasn't he?
Yeah. I mean, he was supposed to be in the top
Number
3, top
5.
4. Yeah.
Yeah, he might have been like the number 5 recruit. That is just always a W. When you're a really good team that develops players well and you can get a guy like that who underperformed in college, is need him. You have so many other young players that are, developing that if he works, he works. If not, so be it, right? You only spent the 28 pick on him.
Yeah.
Just think losing Peyton the second is the big one, right? And they could never have re-signed him on the contract that the Blazers signed him. It's impossible for this team. So
Yeah.
sense you can't fault them, but it's also he was a big part of this team. You saw how they reacted when he got hurt in that one series. Who was that against?
I think it was Dylan Brooks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Dylan Brooks in the Memphis series, right? That was a big loss, right? And they all acted that way because he was so important to their team, and it showed. Like their defense was seriously not as good when he wasn't out there. That's how important he was. He changed the whole dynamic for them. So, I mean, Otto Porter Jr., another guy that they probably just couldn't have re-signed. I don't know. That's pretty tough, but I don't know. I'm kind of tempted to put him back up to good at the bottom of good just because they have all their guys that just won the championship. They haven't
Yeah.
done anything crazy. If they say tomorrow they sign Draymond to a max, dude, I think you'd have to put him down 2 tiers. I would put him at mid at that point because I think signing Draymond at this point in his career to a max is like you just have to own the fact that this is like a you've been here forever type of situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not worth a max. He's just not. I know he showed out in the last few games of the finals, but he was like borderline unplayable up to that point. So
Yeah.
you cannot forget those things. And I know that teams as smart as the Warriors don't forget those things, but
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to give them a good just because they're bringing back the same team that just won the championship. That's good enough for good, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with. I mean, here's then I'll ask you this: like, are you on the owner side where he doesn't, where the owner is kind of tired of paying the luxury tax? I mean, are you on the side where you're saying I'm not gonna re-sign Draymond Green? I might not try to re-sign Klay Thompson. Are you in that camp?
Dude, I would. That's such a boo-hoo. Boo-hoo. Like that's what you get. You're dynasty. Like by all accounts, in the modern era, this is the dynasty of the
Yeah.
2010s and leading into the 20s. Dynasty ever in any sport or in the history of sports is expensive by the standards of whatever that league is at the moment, right? You don't have a dynasty without paying guys like they're the best. That's why you're a dynasty. So
Yeah.
this is what happens, man. This is what happens, and I think that they've had a lot of out opportunity throughout
Yeah.
the years. They've had plenty of opportunities to get off of these guys' contracts at good points, at points where they
Mm-hmm.
looked like they were down in their careers. They didn't, and they just won a championship. So I would say I'm gonna be a little mean here. I would just say shut up. Like, greedy can you be? You have the best team in the league. You've won the most championships in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It should cost the most. It should. If it didn't cost the most to be that good, point of the bad teams trying,
Yeah.
we would have no. That's when we get into that whole it's a word that people like to use a few years ago, parity in the league, right? We don't really
Yeah.
talk about that anymore, but that's when you get to a league that has no parity. Like there is no parity in a league where the best team over a 10-year span doesn't cost the most. So
Yeah.
go with it, man. You're the Warriors.
Yeah. I mean, and the other option too is you just tell the league, hey, let's go with the hard cap salary then. And I'm sure they would hate that because then you can't re-sign all those guys and you'd have to get rid of your Draymond Greens, your Thompsons, and just kind of be a one.
Well, and this is a longer conversation for another day too, but just like short, like it's the ultimate boohoo because you have this collective bargaining agreement coming up. You're about to make revenue out the wazoo in like 2 years. So just suck it up and own it and keep your good team and go into that collective bargaining agreement as the best team in the league and get your money back then. You're as rich as it comes. So just deal with it. Or get rid of Draymond. It's that simple.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, last thing. I'm
okay,
sorry. I just thought of one more thing. At the end of the
day,
day, you don't need to pay Draymond to still be classified as one of the best teams in the league right now. You could send him to Atlanta, wherever. I don't even care. Anywhere in the league, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your team is still legitimately one of the best teams in the league by a standard of you have all of these assets to go get anybody on a better contract than Draymond on a max. Go do it, situations where it seems like they're just kind of bullied by their superstars, and rather than blame the superstars for wanting more money than maybe they're worth, rather blame the situation that the league is putting them in, which is really not a bad situation to begin with. So shut up.
All right, let's move on to the Houston Rockets. Obviously making no moves in free agency, but they did get Sterling Brown. They got Trey Burke, Marquise Chris, and Boban Marjanovic from a trade. Via the draft, they got Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, who I really like, Ty Washington Jr., another good player that they brought in. They lost Queen. They waived John Wall. Christian Wood obviously traded to the Mavericks, and of course they have these free agents. For the Houston Rockets, if I was to give them a grade, I'd probably say it's a mid offseason because I just think that they're still so young. I think this is the time now where they need to start thinking about adding some more players of the older variety just to kind of ease the youngsters into the league. Again, this team is going to be an exciting team to watch, but I need to see more progression from some of these guys. Jabari Smith did not leave me with high hopes in that sense as like being the guy to take over. This is obviously going to be Jalen Green's team. Sengun's going to be a good player for them. But I think Tari Eason as an energy hustle guy, I love that pickup for them. Obviously watched him out in the Seattle area. I think he'll be a good player for them. So I'm excited from that aspect. But in terms of will they do anything this season? Probably not. They'll probably be the same, either second to last or third to last team in the West. And so I think for the Rockets, it's a mid off season.
I think a little bit higher of it, but I wouldn't argue too much. Like I would put them in solid just because again, my standard I keep going by is like do you understand the timeline of your best players? Are you forcing something or are you not understanding the quality of players you have on your team? And I think they understand. Like kind of like the way they're building this team with Sengun is kind of your more traditional center. Jabari Smith is a really big power forward who can kind of defensively almost play a center. Like he's so big and long, he can almost do that and cover some of the other spots for Sengun.
Uh-huh.
But Tari Eason again, like I might not be as high on him as you are or some other people, but he is by all accounts going to be a really terrific player in the league for a long time. Like just even defensively alone, he's going to have his value in the league.
Yeah.
Getting a player like Ty Washington at 29, like another guy that fell dramatically from where his pedigree in high school had him.
Mm-hmm.
And dude, there is something to be said about Kentucky guards who underperform and go later in the first round.
Yeah.
It is a thing that happens in the NBA. And whether that's Calipari's coaching style, or just the way that Kentucky is run, or maybe run improperly with having too many prospects, like I think that there's a chance in which people look at Ty Washington, maybe not as good as Tyrese Maxey or even somebody like Quickly, but more in the Quickly sense than Maxey. Like, wow, this guy, I can't believe he was 29th. What happened at Kentucky with him? And
Yeah.
his skill set is definitely better than the 29th overall pick. So I like it. I like it. You get rid of John Wall, you get rid of Christian Wood, something that both of us thought should have happened last season.
Mm-hmm.
You only get younger. So I like it. I would say solid, but I'm fine at the top of mid.
Top of mid. Okay.
I would put them ahead of Chicago, that's for sure. Like if you were to compare those two 1-to-1, I think they had a much better offseason than Chicago.
Okay. Let's move on to the Indiana Pacers. Didn't really do anything in free agency, but they did make a couple of draft picks and trades. They obviously got Aaron Naismith and Daniel Theis from that Malcolm Brogdon trade. Via the draft, they got themselves Benedict Mathurin, Andrew Nemhard, Hugo Besson, Kendall Brown. I'm not sure if I said Besson right.
I like Hugo Besson. You did. I like
Besson. And then obviously losing some free agents. I think that this was a mid off season. I would go mid again for them. I love the pickup of Benedict Mathurin. I think that he is a really good player. I think he's going to really change the room for the Pacers. But obviously, like you said, they're talking about timelines. They are on a different timeline than most of these other teams, and so they're obviously not going to try to make the big flashy free agency signings. It seems like Larry Bird is stepping down from making decisions for the Indiana Pacers, and so this is going to be a whole new front office situation where they're going to decide what they're going to do. And so I'm going to go with mid from the fact that they did address some needs. I think they got Andrew Nemhard as well as a backup guard. They got Benedict Mathurin, again, a forward that can do a lot of great things. And so they're kind of starting over again. They still need to get rid of Miles Turner, in my opinion, and I believe Buddy Hield, just so they can kind of now officially continue the reboot, which they're trying to start. And so that's why I give them a mid off season.
Yeah. I like this one a little bit more than you, but I can't deny it's probably mid. I would argue that if that Ayton contract that they had sent him and he signed, if that had ended up working out for this team, I would actually put them in good, personally.
Yeah.
That not ending up getting him, which you can't fault them at all. They sent him I thought a very reasonable contract for a 23-year-old former first overall pick who's been to the finals. Like I think that contract was mega reasonable. If they had gotten him, I would have to put them good, but they didn't. So
yeah.
Benedict Mathurin though, who by all accounts, like one thing I actually really like about Benedict Mathurin a lot is it's kind of recreating, like he could in potential alone recreate that situation where they had Oladipo, where he really started to show out with Indiana.
Yeah.
Just because I think skill set wise, they're really pretty similar in like their attitude as far as like dominating physically, like on the court. I think they're both capable of doing that. I like it, but it's one of those things where it has to be mid just because they didn't go up at all, really. They're
Yeah.
still going to be one of the worst teams in the East. It's just I like their youth quite a bit.
Yeah. Should we move on? LA Clippers?
Go for it.
All right, let's
Clippers.
move on to the Clippers. Obviously, they're getting back Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, more so Kawhi Leonard from that injury that he had. Free agency, they added John Wall. And then via the trade, they got Diabate, Musa Diabate. And then, of course, they lost Harnestein to the Knicks. So, again, didn't really do too much in the offseason, but they did get John Wall. And so, if I were to go with kind of a grade for this, I would have to give them to one of the close to worst off seasons, in my opinion.
Wow. That's pretty harsh.
The reason why it's harsh is because I feel like for the Clippers, they're stuck. They're stuck in a room. They're stuck in a situation where they need to decide what they're going to do, try to get some role players to go along with both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Again, I think that those two guys are solid players, but they haven't done anything, in my opinion, for me, to warrant, especially the Clippers. I know they added John Wall. He's going to be a solid player for them, but is he going to be the John Wall that we got even 3 or 4 years ago? Right? You know, this dude was drafted in 2010. I would love to see him play similarly to what he was in DC. I'm not sure if we're going to get that. Shooting has never been his strong suit, and so for me, they need a lot more role players, a lot more guys to do some stuff. I have to give them a close to worst.
Disagree on this one again a little bit, and it's the same. It's funny that they're right next to each other because I would still say that I would put the Nuggets a lot higher than close to worst.
Yeah.
Personally, like I was saying, I think it's very similar to the Nuggets situation for the Clippers. Right, by all accounts, if they're healthy, this is a championship caliber team. Right, me personally, they're one of my teams I'm looking out. I know there's been a lot of like betting action on the Clippers coming into this season so far too. A lot of people really like the Clippers coming in. And I'm kind of with them. Like I think this is a good example of a team that last season was not representative of what they are, really. You know, like clearly you're missing one of the best players in the league with Kawhi. You missed one of the other best players in the league for a big bulk of the season with Paul George being injured. So I like the addition of John Wall. I like the things he said. Understanding he doesn't need to be the Batman, I think was his quote. Like, he doesn't need to be the Batman in the situation. If he really embraces that and is showing off the skills that made him such a special guard in the first place, which I know a lot of the things that made him special were his athleticism, his speed was just, shockingly, he was so fast. But he legitimately has always been a good passer. He's been a good just court general. He just other parts of his game that kind of took away from that a little bit. Like he was offensively their best player too for a while. So if he goes into this stage of his career knowing that he's not that guy offensively anymore, but he can still help Kawhi and Paul George, I think that this team's pretty dangerous. So I would say mid just because there's not enough to put it higher, but it's definitely not bad, I don't think.
Okay, so is that one of the teams you move up? Are you moving them up to mid?
I would want to move Denver up before I move them up. So I don't know if I can move them up. Okay. Denver up, and then we put, like, the Clippers cannot be behind Brooklyn, to me, personally. Like, I know maybe we're not doing the rankings per tier as much as maybe I think we are, but just the fact that Brooklyn, and, like, I don't think it's as bad as Brooklyn or Dallas is, Like, they didn't lose anything critical, and they didn't necessarily add anything critical either, so... I like Nembhard too, actually, going back to Indiana, Sean. I like Nembhard a lot. I talked about him in the Summer League. I thought he looked awesome in Summer League. He was a guy that actually moved in the middle of Summer League, didn't he? Moved teams, I think. I'd be wrong, though.
All right, let's move on to the Los Angeles Lakers, the city
Oh my gosh.
The city of turmoil as it pertains to Jeannie Buss talking, whatever else is going on for them. So the LA Lakers, free agency, they signed a lot of mid-tier guys, but they could potentially help them out in the long haul. They've got Troy Brown Jr., Thomas Bryant, Damian Jones, Juan Toscano Anderson, and Lonnie Walker. Via the draft, they got Max Christie. Nothing via trade yet, but they lost Malik Monk as a signing. And so far, they have free agents of Melo, Ariza, Augustine. They have a bunch of the older guys. And so, with that being said, the Lakers, they are a team that I would have to say is pretty similar to the Brooklyn Nets in the sense that I think that there's one more move that they can make in order for them to be a championship team. Obviously, they kept Russell Westbrook, they've kept Anthony Davis, LeBron James is still there, and it just seems to me what they're trying to do is, and obviously they had the phone call where they huddled together and said, "Hey, we're doing this together." But if we had to rank kind of the offseason so far for them, it is definitely close to worst. Just because of the fact that they have yet to sign players that they need to. Again, the offseason is still here. The season hasn't officially started yet. But if we were ranking it right now as of July 27th, 2022, it's definitely one of the close to worst.
Yeah, I would argue of all the teams we've talked about so far, like this is right there neck and neck with Brooklyn and Charlotte. Like the pretty horrendous offseason for the Lakers. And it goes down to like not even just the obvious stuff. Like the obvious stuff, let me just get it out of the way, right? Not doing anything with the Westbrook situation is borderline the biggest L any team has took in a few years.
Yeah.
Right. This Westbrook situation is like one of the worst things that's been happening in the league for a while. It seems to only get uglier every news article that comes out from behind the scenes. So already take him down a huge peg for that. That's just a bad situation. But then let's talk about like Lonnie Walker the fourth got way too money. Didn't he get the full mid-level exception from the Lakers?
I believe so, yes.
That's too much, man. Like maybe I've watched more of Lonnie Walker the fourth than other people, and I actually really liked him coming out of Miami. Dude, he just is not that. He's not that good. He's not valuable to that level. Especially like, I heard somebody else say this. I don't remember who it was. I wish I'd give him credit, but they were saying that like they were shocked to see that Lonnie Walker got the mid level and Juan Toscano Anderson didn't get that. They would have thought it would be the reverse. And to me, that's the perfect way to think about it. I would have given Juan Toscano Anderson that mid level before I gave it to Lonnie Walker. So that's pretty tough. But they ended up getting Juan Toscano Anderson on a pretty friendly contract. Just don't really like these guys enough to think that they're going to change anything. Like Troy Brown Jr. doesn't change anything. Thomas Bryant doesn't really change anything. Damian Jones, I mean, what are you talking about? You know, and let's go with the guy they lost to in Malik Monk. I thought he was like one of the bright points of the team last season. Like his chemistry with LeBron, it just worked with Malik Monk. And I think losing him, even though they couldn't have signed him for as much as the Kings did, I believe.
Yeah.
I thought that was an L. This is a really ugly offseason. But again, like you said, it's not as hopeless, I think Brooklyn is. I think there's still a chance that they can go do something, even though I think the chances are pretty slim. I would argue just getting rid of Russell Westbrook in any circumstance is a bigger W than anything Charlotte could do.
Wow.
Getting him off the team, at least you have LeBron and Anthony Davis. Like, I don't think that's as bad as what Charlotte's done to their squad. So
yeah,
it's definitely not good. This is, if you're a Lakers fan, this has got to be a pretty painful offseason. But I don't know. It's not hopeless, man. It's not hopeless. It's pretty close. It's pretty close.
All right, let's move on to the next team. We got the Memphis Grizzlies, another one of Sean's teams.
Grizzlies.
The Grizz. Nothing via free agency, but they did get Danny Green from the 76ers. Via the draft, they got La Riviera. They got David Roddy. I butchered that
Dude,
name.
I like that name. La Riviera is way better. Jake LaRavia.
Jake LaRavia.
La Riviera, dude.
Let me just say,
he's gonna get a sponsorship.
La Riviera. We got David Roddy, Kenny Chandler, who I like, Vince Williams Jr., and then they lost Kyle Anderson, who went to the Timberwolves. They lost D'Anthony Melton. This, to me, like their offseason so far, it's not necessarily the best, but it is not necessarily the worst. So I'd have to say it's a very mid offseason for the Grizzlies, just because of the fact that I think that this team has some decent pieces to help them try to get to the next level that they need to, right? John Morant's going to get a year older. The only concern, the thing that sucks so far from the offseason is that Jared Jackson Jr. is going to be injured once again. And is not going to be there to work and get better this summer. And then it's going to continue for them to be in that mid tier of like, okay, Jared Jackson Jr. can never stay healthy, so we can never get that full offseason where he grows. And so I'd have to give them, like I said, a mid offseason, nothing too crazy.
I like Memphis's offseason. I would put them in solid, personally. Of understanding the timeline. I keep saying that I sound like a broken record. I'm sure. But I think it's critical. I really think that is a critical function of running an NBA team, especially nowadays with how good the league is.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding the timeline of where your player's at, not rushing anything, putting people in bad contract situations. Dude, that is really a major part of the game, in terms of roster construction. So I have to take into consideration that off season, really, but this off season in particular, where every team is just so good. The thing with Memphis is I really liked their draft a lot. I really like Jake LaRiviera, LaRavia himself. Did you see the drama with Jake LaRavia? Did you see the thing that happened with him leading into the draft?
Wasn't it that they thought he was a lot older, so he fell in the draft, and then as soon as they found out he was like, what, 20?
Yeah, there was an error on like Google about his age. I think it said he was 23 and he's actually 19. Dude, he's legitimately a talented player, and he's a great role player for this team. He's a guy that is probably going to get some minutes for this team. Just for his three-point shooting alone, he's probably going to get minutes, and he's a big kid too.
LaRavia.
I really like David Roddy leading into the draft, and I loved like his frame and the way he could kind of bang down low. If you have somebody like Jaren Jackson Jr., who's always getting hurt, David Roddy is a great player to have. And one player that we haven't even mentioned that they got undrafted is Kenny Lofton Jr. We're both huge Kenny Lofton Jr. people, and get him for free, basically, like the equivalent of free. He's really a very similar player to David Roddy. I would actually argue that like he's probably more skilled than David Roddy is, and they picked him 23rd. And I like both those guys a lot. So long term, I think that this was a huge W. One thing, and this is why I bring up the timeline with Memphis, I don't think that this is a championship team this season. I didn't think they were a championship team last season either. By understanding you're not and not forcing anything, like for example, going out and getting KD, like they were one of the teams that got brought up a lot when the KD thing first dropped. Like Memphis, go get this guy. Me, that's a bigger mistake in terms of team building than Jaylen Brown getting traded from the Celtics. Like these dudes are so young. The timeline of a player like Kevin Durant and John Morant couldn't be any more different, realistically. So I like it just in terms of they were already going up, and this is another way for them to continue going up. So I give it a thumbs up.
All right, let's move on to the Miami Heat. The Heat. Nothing via free agency.
With this one.
Nothing
I got quick thoughts for the Heat.
All right. Yeah. Go ahead.
These Miami Heat fans aren't going to like me. I think that this has been an L. I think this offseason has been pretty weak for them. I would really like to pick the 27th pick, Nikola Jovic. Yeah, I think he's legitimately, he should have gone higher than 27th in the draft, in my opinion. I think he's too skilled, too big, too offensively talented long-term to have gone that low. People are going to regret that one. Besides that, though, I really don't like their offseason. I thought they overperformed in the playoffs last season. I know people have been saying that since the bubble when they went to the finals, right? I really thought they overperformed. I did not believe in them going into the playoffs very much for the reason that they ended up losing for, which is they don't have enough offense on that team, like consistent offense. Showed getting played off the court in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Celtics. Like he just couldn't do it. I mean, he's defensively too much of a liability and too inconsistent offensively. And so far this offseason, all they've done is they're going to trade a bunch of people or be in rumors to trade for just about everybody and not make any of the trades, Yeah. And when you see the things happen, like what's happening with Boston, with Jaylen Brown putting the SMH tweet out, right, about being in the rumors for KD. energy is the same for every player everywhere in the league, right? Some people very rarely understand 100% that it's a business. End of the day, feelings get hurt. People don't like to be in rumors, right? And by all accounts, Pat Riley called out Tyler Hero immediately after they lost in the Eastern Conference Finals, and Bam Adebayo has been in just about every trade this offseason, potentially.
Yeah.
So I think that this is a big L, man. I think Heat culture is probably going to take a little bit of a dip. I think they haven't done anything to get better. If anything, losing PJ Tucker is a little bit of an L too. Could not have signed. I mean, Philly signed PJ Tucker for way too much. We'll talk about that in a little bit. That contract is ridiculous. But even then, losing him is still a loss for Miami. They needed guys like that. So I don't know. Jimmy is a year older. That the play style that Jimmy has is physically taxing over time. So I think that this team is worse. That's my metric for how I rank these teams. I think that this team is worse than it was last offseason. And realistically, it's not like they lost anybody. It's just that they got older, and I don't think anybody got better.
So you put them in close to worse? Worse?
That might be harsh. That might be too harsh. Put them at the bottom of mid, personally.
All right, bottom of mid is where they go. And let's move on to the next team, the Milwaukee Bucks.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm no B. Jennings. Here we go. They got Okay, that was really cringe. The free agency, they got Joe Ingles. They got Joe
I kept going with it. I'll let you go. I'll let you have that one.
They go with Joe Ingles. They got Marjon Beauchamp, who great pickup. I love that pickup in the draft. And they didn't lose anybody. So I think for me, I'm giving them a good offseason. I'm going good offseason for them. Because again, they are a team that had dealt with injuries with Chris Middleton. So they had to just rely on Giannis and Drew Holiday. But now that they're kind of back together again, the band's back together. You add Marjon, who's kind of like a scrappy guy, can also hit some good shots, played in the Ignite League. You brought in Joe Ingles, kind of a playmaking shot creator in his own right. I know he's coming off an ACL tear, but man, you replace some of these guys like Bembry, Wigginton, Nwara, and obviously PJ Tucker from 2 years ago. You bring in Joe Ingles. That's a good offseason. You bring in a great player in Joe Ingles. You bring in a great young player in Marjon. I think you're looking pretty solid. So I'm going to go with a good offseason for them.
Yeah, and see, I would say, Bernie, you need to keep the same energy with all these teams. I would compare this team very heavily to the Clippers in Denver, right? Like teams that underperformed in terms of like what the expectation was in the playoffs last season, right? And they didn't need to do anything crazy. Like, by all accounts, I picked Celtics going into the playoffs last offseason just because I thought the momentum was there, and it was, not to pat myself on the back too much. The problem is I think Milwaukee is a better team. I really do. Yeah. I think Milwaukee is the best team in the league. I thought they were the best team in the league last season. And it's funny coming from the 2021 where they win the finals, win the championship, and people are kind of questioning whether or not it was a deserved championship. And then the next season, it really felt like they probably were the best team last year if Chris Middleton didn't get hurt. So it's much exactly what you said, man. Like, honestly, I like Marjon Beauchamp a lot. Getting him at 24 is a nice pickup. He's going to give you some nice minutes off the bench for this first couple seasons. And then, honestly, getting Joe Ingles for literally nothing. If Joe Ingles comes back and is 75% Joe Ingles from Utah, that is a valuable player to have on this Utah team, by all accounts. Like, not the worst defensive player, and he's definitely going to get you a couple threes. So I like it, man. You have Giannis. You can't even fault this team. I think that this is tempted to put this in like top of good, but we'll just put them in good in general. I agree.
All right, let's go to Minnesota. So Minnesota via free agency got Anderson, Brian Forbes, Austin Rivers, Rudy Gobert, and through the draft they got Wendell Moore Jr., Josh Minott, and Matteo Spagnolo. That's kind of.
Ask you a question before we dive too much into
who is Matteo Spagnolo?
Minnesota. Who is Spagnolo? Steve Spagnolo's son. No, I was going to ask you: is this team the most divisive? Do you think that they're the most divisive of all the teams we're going to talk about, like in terms of grading their offseason, because they have the biggest move. So I think they're probably the biggest question mark for everybody. I think that people's opinions on this one would swing pretty dramatically.
I would agree with you there. I think that this is probably the most polarizing one, just from the fact that they traded for Rudy Gobert. They've obviously drafted the guys that they did. They got Kyle Anderson. They got a lot of pieces in. Plus, you bring back D'Lo, Cat, Anthony Edwards. I mean, you're running it back with basically the same squad plus some. So I think that this is going to be a very interesting kind of offseason to grade. So I think you are right. It is divisive because some people rate Rudy Gobert as top class. Some people rate him as trash. And also, Kyle Anderson. A lot of people were like, I'm not really sure about that guy. And so, if I were to pick kind of like where Minnesota was, and I know I'm going away from your question a little bit. I would say
You answered it.
Minnesota has a game-changing offseason.
Wow. And wait, let me question one more thing, because I think that the wording of game-changing offseason might be a little misleading, because it could be game-changing just in general.
A good way?
I would
good
agree.
Way or bad way?
I would agree with you. It could be bad too. Like by a lot of standards, game-changing offseason could go both ways. Like it could be game-changingly bad, or maybe it's just unknown, but it's game-changing. You know what I mean? It could be. It's definitely going to change everything for this team.
Should I do championship offseason? Then would that be a better name?
Ooh. Yeah. I would say championship offseason. Do you think that it's a championship offseason? Because I was the one that had the dramatic reaction live in stream when the trade was announced. I had the dramatic reaction of saying, I think that this is a huge trade for them and puts them in title contention. Right?
Yeah.
That was like 5 minutes after the trade. And honestly, I kind of still feel that way. I really do. Like, I still think the trade is kind of terrible in terms of how much they had to give up. Like, pretty insane amount of value to give up for Rudy Gobert. But here's the big difference, and something that I don't really do. I don't understand what it is about current fans, and maybe this has just been a thing forever. Maybe it really has. Maybe any sport, just people are dramatic because they love the sport, they love their team, and they hate certain players and love certain players, right? NBA basketball is so much about fit. It is so much about fit. And I think that this fit is perfect. I think it's so great. Like, I'm huge on this trade for this team in the sense that I think a lot of the things that Rudy Gobert has always been faulted for masked by the team that he's now on.
Yeah.
You and I have disagreed about this in the past, the fit with Utah, like what the construction of that team was. I personally was of the opinion they never had good enough perimeter defenders to have a player like Rudy Gobert be your center point of defense.
Yeah.
This team, the difference is you have a guy like Anthony Edwards who is physically, he is on another level. I mean, he is basically the guard equivalent of Giannis right now, to me personally. On a physical, like you're comparing him to the peers at his position, he is physically that different than the rest of the guards, I would say. He's also 21 years old, and he's already, I would argue, a superstar. And this is one of those things where maybe they're not understanding the timeline. Maybe they're pushing it a little too soon. Like, is Anthony Edwards really ready to go out for a big swing type move like Rudy Gobert? Say that there's probably a lot of people who would argue no, he's not. I am all in. Like, I don't know if, other than Evan Mobley, I don't know if there's been a guy in the last 4 seasons. We have to talk Luka. Like, you and I were huge on Luka, but barring Luka, barring Mobley, I don't know if I've ever been as all in as I am with Anthony Edwards. I see a guy is a championship caliber player, a guy that is going to elevate an entire team's persona, their culture, their attitude, their winning mentality. He is that guy. If you pair him with two bigs who perfectly counter each other's skills in the sense that, Cat has never been a very good defender. People And we've argued about Cat ad nauseum before. You know how good Cat is, whether or not his potential is as high as people think it is. Cat. This is now where we're going to see the perfect version of Cat, a version of Cat where he doesn't need to be the defensive center point, the anchor of a team, be a true center. He doesn't need to do that. He has Rudy Gobert now. Now he can be out on the outside, spacing the floor, doing the things he's good at. Team, and by the metrics of our tier list, right? I would not have said they were a championship caliber team before this trade, but with having Rudy Gobert, the ceiling is just so much higher. The ceiling is so much higher, and getting a 1 seed or a 2 seed, regular season, this team is going to be insanely good.
Yeah.
Not saying 100% they're going to win the championship, but they're going to have a really good record, and I think that this team will benefit greatly from having home court advantage if they end up getting that far. So I agree with you, man. This is game-changing. I think the trade is bad. Gave up way too much, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the offseason at large. Did they make their team better? They did, 1,000%.
All right, let's move on to the Pelicans. The Pelicans did a pretty decent job, I thought, this NBA offseason. Didn't do anything in the free agency, didn't do anything via trade, but they did get some great players in the draft. They got Dyson Daniels, who I like, EJ Liddell, another good player that I liked, and then they got Carlo Matkovic. And so, if I were to grade the Pelicans, I think for the Pelicans, their moves more so rely on the guys coming in this year, right? When you got guys like Alvarado coming back from a good season, kind of the energy guy, kind of brought that hustle to what the Pelicans need in the NBA playoffs. You bring back the head coach, Willie Green, who I really like. And so I think if I were to give the Pelicans an offseason grade, I'd probably have to give them a mid offseason. Not from the fact that I think that they're a mid team, but just from the fact that, they added some good players in the draft. Let's see if those players, especially with guys like Zion Williamson coming back from injury, signing that max contract extension. You got Brandon Ingram, in trade rumors as well. The Kevin Durant stuff. They're like, oh, well, maybe he can go to New Orleans as a player. But to me, I think more so than anything else, I'm excited to see how the Pelicans play this coming season. I think they're going to be obviously a playoff team. The question for me, like I said, does Dyson Daniels get them over the hump? Because I think they're still missing that point guard that they desperately need.
I would say this is a solid offseason. I think one thing you didn't mention that was a huge question mark like a year ago was the Zion contract extension. Whether or not he would be the first person to ever say he didn't want it and leave the team. The case may be, demand a trade, whoever, right? He turned it around the last half of last season in such a way that I mean, honestly, if the Celtics hadn't done what they did, they would have been the most shocking team of the year. You know, they were atrocious for the first half of the season, and we roasted this team, and fully so. They deserved it, but they turned it around, and I think just the fact that they did enough to convince Zion to sign that max extension, whether that means he's going to be there long term, who knows nowadays? We don't know that. They did it. They got him to sign. Got Dyson Daniels at number 8 overall, who very well could be this year's Josh Giddey, where people looking like, dang, dude, this guy is so good. I like this offseason a lot. Like, it goes on with what we've been talking about. Did they get better? They got better in the season last year dramatically, and they re-signed their best player and got another guy who's going to start for them in Dyson Daniels. So I like this team a lot, man. I actually am excited to watch them. So I'd say solid, personally.
So we'll move them up to solid. Let's move on to your team now, the New York Knickerbockers. Knicks free agency was a huge success for them. They got Jalen Brunson and Isaiah Hartenstein. In the draft, they got Trevor Keels. They obviously lost Alec Burks, Taj Gibson, Nerlens Noel, and Kemba Walker. And Aracano is on the free agency, so we don't know if he's going to re-sign with them. The Knicks, I'll let you go first, Pete. This is your team. I'll let you go first.
All right, I mean, I would say I'm a pretty fair critic. Would you agree? I don't think I'm necessarily the biggest homer of all time. I've never been one to necessarily just say
you've had some homer picks in the last couple of them, just from the last offseason.
Have I? Maybe a little.
You're Fournier and Kemba Walker.
Yeah, I did like those signings. I'll be honest with you. Being said, I think that this offseason is, I would say this is a good offseason. I really would. I don't think it's, I definitely don't know what you could look at and say this was bad. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it, realistically, last year was a disaster for this team.
Yeah.
Last year was an absolute unmitigated disaster. They all underperformed. The team took major steps back throughout the whole season. And in general, things just didn't go the Knicks' way.
Mm-hmm.
But lo and behold, they still had built a culture enough to convince a player like Jalen Brunson, whatever people think of Jalen Brunson. I mean, I've seen so many people say like this is one of the biggest overpays they've ever seen. You don't watch basketball or look at basketball contracts enough if you think Jalen Brunson's 4 for 110 or well, no, it's 4 for 104. If you
Yeah.
think that that's one of the biggest overpays you've ever seen, I dare you to go look at the 2017 offseason or 2016 offseason. Dare you to go look at that because this is about as reasonable as it gets nowadays. I mean, he's like the 17th or 18th highest paid point guard in the league. He's probably better than the 17th or 18th best point guard in the league. Maybe. I mean, I'd have to, that's maybe another longer conversation, but it's a very friendly team contract and long-term deal.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Speaking terms, right? Because the last 2 years are not guaranteed. Isaiah Hartenstein is a really solid backup big. Like, very popular name. People don't really know him, but he is a skilled dude. And he was actually, like, we didn't actually talk about that enough for the Clippers. He's kind of a loss for the Clippers. Maybe that is a
Yeah.
good reason to keep them where they're at. Because he was solid and they really lost him for nothing. So
Yeah.
getting him on a super friendly contract too for the Knicks was a W. You cannot understate how official it is to this team to get off the contracts they did. And really, they didn't give up much to get off those contracts. I mean, the biggest question mark, and maybe this is the biggest thing that's going to hold them back from being good, and maybe I'll actually convince myself here that it's just solid. It's going to depend on what they do with that cap space. If they do nothing and they traded a first-round pick to clear cap space for just Jalen Brunson,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of an L. Why did you do that? You didn't need to do it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, I'd be very shocked if they walk away with nothing. And then the question is, are they going to give up like a historic amount of picks and everything to go get somebody like Donovan Mitchell? I mean, that's kind of dealer's choice. You know, that's not too far off the conversation we just had for Minnesota. So
Yeah.
I'll go down to solid. I think this is a solid offseason. They addressed their biggest need literally for the last 25 years, which is a true point guard. And they got a backup center. They re-signed Mitchell Robinson on a nice team-friendly contract, in my opinion, 4 for 60.
Yeah.
I like this offseason. Solid.
Yeah, I'd go solid too. Again, I think the Brunson thing, like you said, I think a lot of people are blowing that out of proportions. Jalen Brunson, solid point guard for the Mavericks. They could have signed him for a lot less. They were dumb, did not do that. And so for the Knicks to get him and just kind of really solidify that point guard position, like you said, they've been trying to search for that solid point guard since we've been kind of fans since high school, middle school even. You know, ever since the mellow days of.
I mean,
after.
literally forever. Like the last player of his caliber to play point guard for this team, and I'm not kidding. I think it's Raymond Felton.
Raymond Felton. Eek.
That says a lot.
And so I
This
think
team is that.
yeah, and so I think that was a good pickup. I think I would say it's solid from that perspective, but other than that, I still think that, you know, whether what you ever think of, you know, Julius Randle, it might be time to look to see if you can trade him away, or you know, maybe if you're a Randle guy, you're looking to see if you can add a piece to help him, because again, you have RJ Barrett. You know, we're still trying to figure out what he is in this league. You know, are people excited about him? Are people kind of, you know, has the RJ hype kind of died down a bit, and so that's something that the Knicks have to discuss within themselves. And so for the Knicks, that's the biggest question mark going in for next season is, do they try to use that cap space to get somebody, or are they going to go into the Tinkapalooza to get the next kid that's coming up? That again, we will be releasing a video on that relatively in the first or second week of August is when that video should be coming out.
Ooh, self promo. I like it.
So that's
that's
my next grade.
Speaking, I think this is. I mean, if you're comparing Knicks off seasons to other Knicks off seasons, this is not as bad as it gets.
Yeah,
it's not. This is definitely a step up for them.
All right, should we move on to
Oklahoma City Thunder?
all you?
interesting team here. This is, dude, I'm really always so conflicted with Oklahoma City because I don't know if you remember this. We disagreed pretty adamantly last year on Oklahoma City. I was not a fan of their offseason last year.
Mm-hmm.
In retrospect, I've changed my mind a little bit because Giddey is a lot better than we thought he was. I thought he was going to be solid, but I just didn't like all the things they were doing in terms of just continuing to go get picks after picks after picks and not really doing anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that question mark still remains for me with this team a little bit. Like I think people give this team so much credit for something they really haven't done yet. You know, like in terms of going in this unique way of tanking really hard, being super young, and just accumulating assets constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Still has not led to anything necessarily, but the difference, and this is the reason why I would say they've had a good offseason, is this is finally a season where it seemed like, hey, there's a lot of young guys we like, and we're willing to just give whatever we need to go get them. You know,
Yeah.
luckily they didn't have to do that with Chet. They ended up getting the second pick and getting the guy they wanted. But
Mm-hmm.
somebody like Usman Deng, which it's funny. We just talked about the Knicks. That's who they traded with to get Usman Deng. It's a good example of what I'm talking about. You really like this guy as a prospect long term. He's almost 7 foot tall. He can do a lot of the things that is modern in the NBA right now. And what do? They say, hey, we have more picks than God. Let's go get our guy. So they give 3 firsts to get this prospect. That's a huge W. If you're a team like the Thunder with all these picks, those picks don't matter to them. They really don't. And what are you going to do with those picks? You're going to trade 15 picks to get Kevin Durant? You're not going to do that because it doesn't make any sense. So the thing is, their draft was just so good that I have to put them in a good offseason. Like, I really like both of the Jalen Williams, especially Jalen Williams without the Y, the 12th overall pick. I like him a lot. Dude, this team is going to be better than they were last offseason. That's the thing. At the end of the day, did they get better? They did get better.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'll go ahead. Go ahead.
Just saying I think they got better by a lot. Like I think Chet raises their ceiling in the next few years considerably.
Exactly. And that's the reason why I would also agree with you. It's a good offseason. They did what they needed to do in the draft. They got the players that they wanted. And so to me, as they continue their timeline of what they want, and again, there goes that word again, timeline. The timeline for the Oklahoma City Thunder is on schedule, right? There's no hiccups. The picks that they have, gotten, they fit, right? Because Chet's not supposed to be the superstar of the team. He's supposed to be kind of the guy that fills the missing piece, kind of the X factor for you. And so I think for the Oklahoma City Thunder, as they continue to develop their young guys, I know they just signed the Spurs, I believe. I can't remember. I don't know if it's coach. He's part of the coaching staff for the Spurs that kind of helped the growth of like Kawhi Leonard and other guys like him. I think Tim Duncan as well. Like the younger
I'll
guys.
look it up while you.
Yeah, I think Shams reported it. And so by signing him and getting him, I think they actually are going to be really good next season. Not saying that they're going to be playoff team or play-in team, but they're going to be competitive, and that's what you want from these young guys. And so I'm excited for the Oklahoma City Thunder moving forward. And they just had a great offseason. Again, did they do anything to where they got a superstar from a trade or a signing? No. And that's never going to happen for Oklahoma City unless they have another star player there. But
actually, okay, I found the thing. Sorry to interrupt you. So they ended up signing Chip England from Spurs. And that's actually a huge signing. I mean, I know a lot of people are not into that kind of stuff as much as you and I are, but he is literally one of like maybe the 2 or 3 best shooting coaches in the NBA. Worked with and how much their shooting has progressed in the years of working with him. That's a huge W, man. I actually didn't see that. That's awesome for them.
Yeah, so I think like by adding him and the way that they're going right now, I'm not sure that they really need those other draft picks, in my opinion. I think they have a solid roster. I think they just now need to build the depth for them, and let's see what depth they can get. So again, good offseason. I'm excited for them, and again, another league pass team to kind of monitor and see how they do.
It's one of my squads to watch a lot this year. I have a feeling I'm going to watch like a considerable amount of Oklahoma City. I might be the only person too where my number one thing I want to watch is I want to watch Giddey. I really do. I think he is. really special, man. I think that kid is going to be. I mean, I get a lot of like tall Steve Nash from him.
Tall Steve Nash. All right. Ready to move on to the Orlando Magic?
Let's do it.
All right, Orlando Magic, nothing free agency, nothing via trade, but they did get the number 1 overall pick in Paulo Banquero, Caleb
Huge W.
Houston, and then they obviously lost Robin Lopez, huge loss. And again, they got rid of some guys. They got rid of Michael Carter Williams. They got rid of Dozier. Again, these are just unrestricted free agents, so they could sign again.
Guys that weren't going to play anyway.
I would have to rate their offseason as a solid offseason just because of the fact that you did get the number 1 overall pick. You got Paulo Banquero, a guy that, again, will score at nauseum in the league. I think he was held back by Coach K, in my opinion, watching him in the Summer League. Like, that's the Paulo that I wish was playing at Duke. But obviously, the way that Coach K likes to play, they don't get those opportunities to. And so, when I watch the Orlando Magic from afar, a lot of people might put them in in good offseason, maybe even championship offseason, just from the fact that they got a guy that can be a game changer.
Maybe long term. Yeah.
But I still think that they need to make a lot more moves, and we still have yet to see what they're going to do about their point guard situation. The reason why I am stuck, not because of Jalen Suggs, but because of Cole Anthony, because and RJ Hampton, like they have 3 guys that they're deciding like what to do with, right? It just doesn't feel like they have a solid plan yet in the point guard position. So that scares me a little bit for a guy like Jalen Suggs, who didn't really play in the Summer League, who should have played, but was obviously hurt. I'm concerned that the point guard play is going to be a real scrutiny this coming season if they don't decide who's the point guard at the beginning of the season.
I think Fultz showed enough. at the end of last season. I mean, they were legitimately a much better team when Markelle got back. And like he was, by all accounts, very good too. Like with what he was doing in terms of maybe not number 1 overall pick good a few years ago, but that dude has just worked his butt off and kept getting better at the things that, you know, were weaknesses for him originally, and now they're his strengths. So I'm big on Fultz. I think, like you said, Suggs is a big question mark, right? I would put them in good, if not for this one, maybe a bit of a stickler thing I'm going to talk about real quick, because I think you hit a lot of good points. Just getting Banchero alone is enough to put this as one of the better off seasons. Like, to me, he was the number 1 guy in the draft, and for me, it was pretty clear that was the guy I would have taken if I had the power to make a pick like that. And I think one of the things coming out of Summer League that people talked about a lot that is super underrated with Paolo is he's a freak. Like, physically, it was all about Chet being a physical freak and some of the other guys in the draft. But Paolo is a gigantic person who is himself not like a gigantic person, you know? One of those situations where you look at his frame and his skill set, and it is a little representative. I'm not necessarily saying he's going to be this guy, but I'm saying it is representative of like a young LeBron, like physical build and just being physically ready to go score in the league. That is very uncommon to have those things the way he does. My biggest gripe with this team was how they handled the draft in general, right? Not working out Paolo, not ever committing to doing anything. It was just all so weird, and it didn't feel like they had really any good plan. And they panicked at the end, and luckily their panic took them, I think, to the right guy to take.
Yeah.
Do a very good job on the way to get there. And imagine the leverage they could have put on some of these teams, right? Leading up into the draft to say, hey, Paolo is number 1 guy. That's who we're taking. It's not really how they felt, which is how it seemed leading into the draft. Gotten a really big haul of stuff for that pick, if that's what they wanted to do. Retrospect, maybe Paolo was just what they wanted, the guy they wanted from the very beginning. That's who they ended up with, but they didn't act that way. And I think that they made some mistakes, like in terms of holding cards too close to their chest. Like, you have the first pick, you have all of the leverage. Make that leverage worth something and use it to your advantage. And they did the opposite of that. I thought that was a really bad choice. Would it have turned out to be any different? Would it have led to anything? Maybe not, but it was just so weird. And that alone puts me to like just solid. You know, I don't necessarily think they're very well managed, which is not surprising in terms of Orlando.
Yeah.
But Like a lot of their young guys. I like the core. They're another team I'm going to be watching quite a bit of this season.
Yeah, so let's see. Leave in the comment opinions down below, or leave your comments and opinions down below. What do you guys think of the Orlando Magic's offseason? Are you a fan of it? Or do you think that it's kind of just a solid to even mid off season? Let us know in the comment section down below. And let's move on to the 76ers. Obviously, the big thing for them was re signing James Harden to a 2-year extension. Via free agency, they got Daniel House, JaVale Queen, PJ Tucker, and they got DeAnthony Melton from a trade. They obviously lost Jordan and Danny Green via trades and a signing from DeAndre Jordan. 76ers, I think that there's still moves to be made, so I'm going to give them a mid off season just because I think there's still some more moves to be made for them. I think that they could definitely do a lot more. The question is, what moves do they have left? Because right now, Daryl Morey is in the drawing board trying to think of, okay, we have all this money. What are we going to do with it? So I'm going mid.
I would put them as a good offseason. I would put them as a good offseason. And here's my reasoning. I think one, the James Harden contract is a huge W, right? Huge win for them. Getting as much money off the books in terms of just his contract as they did. And realistically, I think this is the biggest thing, Bernie. And this is maybe where I'm a little bit irrational. I think we have to say that Daryl Morey he's the James Harden whisperer. Like, he really is, man. All the things that we wish to see from Harden for the last few years, like, I've seen all of those things from him so far this offseason. I've seen more videos of James Harden in the gym this offseason, last 5 years combined.
Yeah.
Seen him make sacrifices more than ever in his career, say the right things publicly. I think that's a huge win for this team. Just being able to get a guy like that culturally to buy into what you're trying to do is a really dramatic change of pace for him, and something that I think makes a difference in your locker room, right? But also, huge contract for PJ Tucker, but by all extent, like, PJ Tucker is going to help this team. It's a guy that can take pressure off Joel Embiid physically. He can really, bully people around. I always love PJ Tucker. I think long term, like we've said, that contract is really rough. Like, he's making money when he's 42 or 41 years old. Yeah. That's a lot. But not really what we're talking about necessarily, and they can always get off that when it comes time. Yeah. And, one other person is DeAnthony Melton, too. I actually think he brings a lot of benefits to this team with his perimeter defense, three-point shooting. He's an upgrade to me from Danny Green, who was, by all accounts, super wishy-washy with the 76ers in his tenure. Like, he would have games where it's like, wow, this guy, like Danny Green, is ageless. He could still do the things that made him valuable with the Spurs back in the day. And then he'd have games where it looked like he was like J.R. Smith, like he would just forget what he was doing almost, I like this offseason from them. I thought they were already a contender, maybe more than other people did. Like, I am not necessarily basing it so much on Harden, but more on, like, you have Embiid. You have this guy unstoppable. Like, Embiid might be Giannis, as close to unstoppable as it gets in the league right now. I would say anywhere between like 3 to 6 players in the league that you would classify as unstoppable at any given time. And Embiid is right there in the top 3. He's been the runner-up for the MVP, I think, 2 years in a row, I don't know. I think I'm just higher on their squad in general, and I don't think, again, they got rid of old vets that didn't bring much to the team, and they added in some younger guys who can help and made the team. And like you said, they're a move away with that extra space from Harden's contract. So I'm good. I'm going good on that one.
Okay, I'll meet you in the middle and go solid.
Let's do that. I like it.
All right, let's go to the Phoenix Suns.
Phoenix. Let me take this one, Bernie.
All right, you got it. This is all
Phoenix.
You. Oh, take the wheels.
Now, maybe we're going to get my hottest take of the day. Okay?
Uh-oh.
I think that this is a terrible offseason.
Worst offseason.
Bottom. Maybe not as bad as Charlotte. They're still technically championship contenders, but I would put this in close to worse. I would.
Wow.
And I'll even give myself a little devil's advocate here, right? Like, they ended up getting Ayton on a better contract than what they would have if they had just given him the max, right? That ended up working out relatively okay. But you have to question what that locker room is going to be like, right? Because it ended really dramatically last season. They got absolutely hosed washed, the definition of just rinsed by the
Like
Dallas Mavericks in
Olympus
that game
special.
7. I mean, that is one of the absolute soul-taking performances we've ever seen in the NBA. Now, I am one that always has to question what the carryover of something like that is, because people don't
Hmm.
forget that kind of stuff in the NBA. Like that kind of
Yeah.
stuff lingers, it holds on to teams, and it tarnishes a reputation. And I think I love Chris Paul, Bernie. You know this. I had Chris Paul's Hornets jersey back in the day. I've always been big on Chris Paul. I am
Oh,
genuinely concerned about this season for this team. I think that this is the biggest step back team in the league this year. Here we go.
damn.
Dropping the hammer on them. I was really unimpressed with Devin Booker personally. And Chris
It's,
Paul is about to be 38 years old on a really big contract. The Ayton chemistry situation is still a question. They have positives, right? Like I said, they got the Ayton contract relatively good. They extended Monty Williams. Those are wins. It's just I don't think they're any better than last season. And I think last year was I think that was a deal breaker, like a long-term limiter on how successful this team can be. I cannot see this team outperforming what they did last year. I
wow.
can't do it. I can't see it.
Okay. I mean, I'm not. I would say it's a very mid off season because, like you said, they bring back DeAndre Ayton, but there's still that beef between the head coach Monty Williams, who they just, like you said, extended his contract, and DeAndre Ayton. It's like, how does that chemistry work now? Because it's Monty Williams, when he was talking about it, said this is an internal problem and we'll deal with it. That
Mhm.
to me is not something where it can be easily fixed with just a phone call. Like, you have to
Oh.
build it over time. And so, like, from that perspective, I am not sure if Phoenix will go back to where they were a couple seasons ago, where they were the number one team in the West, battling it out and things like that. I think that this, like you said, is a huge game changer for the Phoenix Suns. And I would probably put them close to worst, just from the fact that you bring back Aiton, but you also bring back the drama between the two, the head coach and the head player, or one of the head players. And like you said, I mean, Booker has kind of proven that he's just not a superstar. He is a star player. And so from that perspective, is he, you gave him the money, nothing wrong with that. It's just now you're stuck with this team, and you have Chris Paul obviously on some big money too. It's a tough sell to anybody to say, like, hey, this team's going to be as good as they were last year. In the regular season, I just don't think that's going to be the case. I think that there's going to be too much drama, and the team's not going to look too hot.
I mean, genuinely, I think that this is going to be the team we look at that had the biggest drop. In like 6 months from now, we're going to look and be like, "Wow, they fell off." And I'm not saying they're going to fall
Mm-hmm.
out of playoff contention completely.
Yeah.
It's just we've talked about Devin Booker a lot too. I've always been pretty low on Devin Booker, relatively speaking, to the general consensus. I just don't think people understand how much a difference Chris Paul having like a season off, basically, or like a relatively easy season with the Thunder a few seasons ago,
Yeah.
coming into the situation in Phoenix, kind of rejuvenated. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think he's still there. And I think that Chris Paul made this whole situation work to the level
Wow.
that it did. And if he takes any step back physically, I think we're going to be looking at this as one of my better calls, because I don't think Devin Booker is that guy. I don't think he's a leader,
He's
really.
just not that guy, pal. Just
Just
not
not.
that
And
guy.
Aiton, I mean, you have to question. We questioned what the chemistry between him and the
Yeah.
coach is going to be. What's the chemistry between him and Chris Paul going to be like?
Yeah.
You know, by all accounts, Chris Paul has stuck his neck out for DeAndre Ayton many times,
Yeah.
basically taking him under his wing, for, lack of a better way to say it. Like, probably was not happy with that situation just as much as Monty was. Like, I bet him and Monty Williams were on the same page with the Ayton
Mhm.
situation. So, only caveat, last thing for Phoenix, the only caveat is, let's say in like 2 months, the NBA comes out and whoever it is, they announce that Sarver is no longer going to be the owner of the
Mhm.
Suns. They're selling the Suns. I think that that's a huge W for the team. Enough so long term that I would actually consider changing how I feel about them coming into the season. But for
Yeah.
now, I think this is one of the worst off seasons.
All right, one of the worst offseason. Let us know in the comment section down below. Do you agree with Pete? Is this one of the worst off seasons for the
People ain't gonna like that.
for the big teams? Again, we're going with spicy takes, so let us know in the comment section down below. All right, time to move on to the Portland Trail Blazers. This one, they got a couple players. They got via free agency, they got Gary Payton. Via the trade, they got Jeremy Grant, and via the draft, they got Pete's guy, Shaden Sharp, Jabari Walker. Sorry to bring that up, but they also
Oh, he's
lost
my. I'm still standing with him for now.
Eric Bledsoe and Joe Ingles lost in free agency. And so for me, the Trailblazers had a very close to worst offseason. More so from the fact that not because they drafted these guys, but more so what direction are they going in? Because to me, a year ago, we were thinking, okay, they're going to tank. They're looking to rebuild. Maybe they're trying to get the kid from 2023, Victor Wembanyama. Maybe they're trying to get one of those free agents, but instead they gave Lillard a max extension. They brought in Jeremy Grant, who again did a decent pickup. They brought Gary Payton II back to the home roots of Portland, Oregon, where he played college ball. I think the Portland Trailblazers are in no man's land right now, and that's the reason why I had to put them as one of my close to worst off seasons.
Yeah, I'm pretty close. Man, there's a couple I think are worse than them for sure, but it's pretty bad. A couple other things you didn't mention. One, that contract extension they gave Dame is pretty crazy. He's going to be making $60+ million in the final 2 years of his contract. I mean, that's pretty crazy, I would say, for any player who's never won a championship, let alone he's almost 30 or he is 30.
Mm-hmm.
He might be 31, actually, now that I say that.
Yeah.
Look that up while I keep talking. Being said, it's exactly what you said, Bernie. I mean, the question is, what's the point? Where are they going? What are they actually trying to do? And realistically, like the obvious answer is they're building around Dame, but Dame enough at this point in his career to make up for the holes that this team has. I like the Jeremy Grant trade in theory. I like the idea of putting a guy like him with Dame. And I believe they re-signed Nurkic to a decent contract as well.
Yep, they re-signed Nurkic. They got Anthony Simons on a good contract now. They got Keon Johnson, they got Jeremy Grant, they got Nazir Little. Again, this roster is not necessarily the worst roster I've ever seen.
That's not terrible.
But at the same time, like you said, like what direction are they going in? Are they thinking that this roster is good enough to compete for a playoff spot? Or do they think that this roster is decent enough to where they can kind of be just an average team? Because again, the Portland Trailblazers need to decide what their future is at this point. Do they want to rebuild and get another guy in, or are they satisfied with just, keeping Lillard until he's done with playing basketball?
And I would argue that I think they answered that this year. Like, to me, I think they answered where they're going, and they're going with what they have, right? They're not trying to blow it up because they wouldn't have extended Dame and they wouldn't have extended Anthony Simons, right?
Yeah.
And that contract is a question mark too, because he's like 22. He had half of a really good season last year. I mean, maybe the whole season was pretty good by most people's standards, but last year was the first time we really saw Anthony Simons do much after a lot of years of hearing about him. To give him $100 million after that is a pretty big question mark. Like, to me, that's one of the more mind-blowing ones. Like, and this isn't just to go back to my Knicks and, play Homer here, but people will question the Jalen Brunson contract all day, but they're not questioning this Anthony Simons one as much. And it's like, I get that he's a little younger, but it's not like he's shown much more than Jalen Brunson, realistically, he really hasn't. So I'm not saying I don't like that contract. It's more just, this season will dramatically depend on how good Dame is. And I do think there's a universe, and this will be where I maybe make some Portland fans happy if they care at all. Like, I think there's a universe in which this is Dame's MVP season. This year to be just the guy, go all out, and Portland overperforms everybody's expectations on the back of him completely. It could happen.
Yeah.
Like adding Gary Payton II too. We talked about him earlier with how big his contract was for the Warriors not to be able to sign him. he's a guy that's like, he brings a lot of good stuff to your squad. You know, he's a winning player. He does the dirty work and he knows what it takes to win. So I don't think I'm as hard on them as you are, but it's definitely not a good offseason. And my guy Shaden Sharp. I like Shaden Sharp. Long term though. I don't think he's going to help very much this first season.
Yeah, so we'll find out in the future like what this team is capable of. So let's move on to the next team. And again, let us know in the comment section down below. Portland Trailblazers fans, how are you feeling about your Trailblazers? Are you excited about your future, or are you in limbo? That's the biggest question mark to come from you guys that I want to know in the comment section down below. Segueing on to the San Antonio Spurs. Remember the Alamo. Remember how this team just got absolutely destroyed by losing a lot of good players. Losing DeJounte Murray was the big one. All-star player. You lost Jock Landale. You lost Lonnie Walker the fourth to the Lakers. And then you drafted Jeremy Sokan, who I really like. You drafted Malachi. Malachi Branham. Blake Wesley. Brought in Isaiah Robley. I know what they're trying to do. We all know what they're trying to do. They're trying to tank. This is not, this isn't something where you're like, okay, we don't know really what they're doing. But if I had to do it, it's probably one of the worst off seasons from this perspective, Pete. They got rid of one of their best players for draft picks for a team that will probably make the playoffs in the Atlanta Hawks. And again, they're betting and crap shooting that they are going to get the guy that they want in Victor Wembanyama in the draft this coming season. Because I don't think that there's any other reason why the San Antonio Spurs would get rid of so many good players. They have a lot more moves to make up as well. And so for me, they are one of the worst off seasons from that perspective.
I think this one is definitely not very good, but I'm a little higher on it than you are just because of where they were at, right? And I've told you my conspiracy theory. I don't know if we talked about that on stream, but the situation with DeJounte Murray, I think, is really fascinating, right? He definitely had a lot of love and respect for Pop, right? Like we saw that. We saw that when Pop, I think, hit that milestone last season where he was. Is he the NBA's most all-time winning coach? Is that what he did?
Yeah, I think so.
And if you go back and look at that, like there's a moment between him and DeJounte Murray where DeJounte Murray is like really emotional for Greg Popovich, right?
Mm-hmm.
That leads me to believe, and just like, I generally speaking, I like the Spurs. I really like Coach Pop. I do think he's the best coach in NBA history personally. And, that leads me to watch the Spurs on occasion. I really think that there was a situation brewing in San Antonio where DeJounte Murray, rather than, come out, a lot of teams do where the player is really unhappy and wants to leave, I think they decided mutually it was the right choice to make. Because I get what you're saying. Like, getting rid of DeJounte Murray on paper is a really bad choice. He's a player that only gets better. He's young. He has a ton of skills. He was basically averaging a triple-double most of last season efficiently, not in a Westbrook type of way, right? They got a lot back for him. Like, getting 3 firsts back you can't be mad at that. I really don't think. Like, I think the 5 basically for Gobert has really changed people's expectations, but that's a big return in most trade situations in the NBA. I don't think they were going anywhere with what they were doing. And they, to be fair, they got a really good contract extension out of Keldon Johnson too. I think it was 4 for 60 or 4 for 80 rather.
4 for 80, yeah.
So it's a really good contract for a player like Keldon Johnson. And intention, which by all accounts it is to tank. This team has a pretty wonderful track record of not tanking, and when they are bad, ending up with the guy they wanted anyway. Look at Tim Duncan, right?
Yeah.
This is one of those situations where I think that throwing this season was the right choice. They weren't going to be good, even if they kept DeJounte Murray or Lonnie Walker, any of those guys. They were one of the worst teams in the West already. So making the choice they did, getting really young, getting Jeremy Sohan, getting Malachi Branham and Blake Wesley, those are good players to get in the first round. Those guys are really solid offensively, and Jeremy Sohan is just good all around, I think. So I like this team, and I like their potential to end up with somebody they're really happy with, because We need to do this again later soon to talk about prospects for this next draft. It's not just Wembanyama. There's like 4 dudes I think that are game-changing prospects in this next draft. Being anywhere in that range to get one of those guys is a good thing to do. So I don't hate it, but it's not a good offseason.
So you go close to worst?
I think.
Mid?
Let's go close to worst. Let's put mid. Let's put bottom of mid. I think it's bottom.
Mid. Okay.
What their expectations were, right? Like, what would you have thought it was much better if they kept DeJounte Murray and ran it back with this team? I would have said they're terrible anyway.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair point. I would probably go close to worst, but I think mid. We can leave them at bottom of mid and just kind of call it good there for the Spurs. Again, Spurs fans, let us know what your opinions are in the comment section down below. Are you guys a huge fan of the San Antonio Spurs? Do you think the Spurs are looking to tank for Victor Wembanyama, or do you think that this is part of Popovich's plan? Because we know Popovich doesn't have a lot of time left in terms of coaching. I know he wants to retire sometime soon. And so the question mark and again, maybe he's lying about that, right? Because I think for him, I think he's a workaholic. He's probably one of those guys that probably never wants to retire. But, at some point you do have to retire at some point. So let us know in the comment section down below about the Spurs. And then there were 3 teams left. Let's go with the Toronto Raptors next. They brought in Otto Porter Jr., DJ Wilson. They got Christian Coloco, who I really like from Arizona out of this draft. Too. I'm going to say that this was a very solid offseason for them. Because the fact that you brought in, again, 2 guys, I will continue to roast Otto Porter Jr. for that contract in Washington.
It was terrible. Not his fault, though.
Yeah, not his fault. Hey, take your money. I'm never going to hate on that.
Exactly.
Otto Porter Jr., bringing him in as a shooter, that's great. DJ Wilson, good player. Coloco, going to be a huge rebounding opportunist down below for them and, crash the boards, both offensive and defensive. And so I am excited about that pickup for them. And so I'm going to go, like I said, I went with I went mid. No, I went solid. I went solid with it, and I'm going to keep my word to it. They didn't lose anybody very big, and I think they're keeping those guys that they want. And so for me, I'm going to go with a good. I'm going to go with solid. Solid offseason.
I would say mid probably for me, but I can't really argue. I can't argue solid either, just because like they're another team, right? In the same place of what are their expectations really, right? Like best 2 players are really meshed in age necessarily with your up and coming best player and Scotty Barnes. Like they're kind of at a crossroads with what they're gonna do, and I think that's why we keep hearing them in every single trade rumor that comes around with every big player. Like that is this team, the definition of this team. They're in a limbo spot where they have a guy like, what's his name? Oh my gosh, I'm totally forgetting. You got Van Vliet and what's the other guy? Pascal Siakam, excuse me.
Scotty Barnes.
Didn't necessarily mesh up really well with what Scotty Barnes is long term. I think the one thing, and this is a big boost for me, I think them being so bullish on Scotty Barnes and keeping him in any trade as an untouchable player. Okay, perfect. He's the only player on your team that should be untouchable. Everybody else, as much as you love Van Vliet, as much as you got to love Pascal Siakam, he was so much better last season too, Siakam, compared to the 2021 season. Those guys are expendable, realistically. They really are. And it really depends on what you're doing with Scotty Barnes long term. I would say, like, one of the very few teams that I would say if they went and traded the whole farm for Kevin Durant and had Scotty Barnes, say they keep Scotty Barnes, they trade some combo of Van Vliet and Siakam with picks or whatever it is, right? How much an L can be an L for getting a player of Kevin Durant's caliber. This team just doesn't need a player like Kevin Durant because what does that do for them? They're not a championship team any more than Brooklyn is if they added him. So I like this offseason in terms of they didn't need to do much because they didn't have much that needed to be done. Like that's a goofy sentence, but didn't have much they could do anyway. So don't force anything and rush anything. Is kind of where I'm coming from. So I like it. I'd say solid, but I'm fine with either way. Yeah. I would say mid, but I'm fine with solid.
All right, we'll leave them at solid then. Or actually, we'll leave them. Well, let's leave them at mid. We'll go kind of
But
go.
let's do mid.
We'll go a little bit higher than the Rockets, but we'll go next to the Nuggets. All right, let's move on. Let's do the Washington Wizards, and then we'll leave the Jazz for last because I feel like we got a little bit more to talk about them. So the Wizards didn't really do too much this offseason.
This is a
They
terrible offseason.
brought in Taj Gibson, brought in DeLon Wright. They got Will Barton, Monty Morris, and then via the draft, they got Yannick Inoza, Johnny Davis, and then they lost Thomas Bryant, KCP, Raul Neto, Ish Smith. This, to me, when I look at it, it's a very close to worst offseason. Just from the fact that they are still bringing in so many guys that fill the same positions of the same players each and every year. Guys like Rui Hachimura, guys like Johnny Davis. Again, I like Johnny Davis, but he's gonna get clogged in the jam that is these players. I mean, let's look at the Wizards roster. And Sean, shout out to you, Sean, for continuing to watch. I appreciate you. You got Johnny Davis, you got Rui Hachimura, you got Corey Kispert, Kyle Kuzma. Like, all those guys are the same players in terms of playing the same positions. You don't know what to do with them. And I think this has to be a breakout year for Rui in order to like really solidify himself as a player that they need, or maybe gets traded. They have Kristaps Porzingis, who I'm not a huge fan of. I don't know anymore, Pete. The Wizards are a confusing team. I don't know what direction they're going in. They re-signed Bradley Beal to a huge contract, again, where people thought he was going to go. I don't even know what to say about this team anymore, other than there's such a logjam of guards that just doesn't make any sense, the moves in the direction that they're trying to go. And it seems like they will continue to be stuck in this limbo for years to come.
I am very tempted to say that this is the worst offseason. Like, this is like really close for me to Charlotte. For different reasons, obviously, but I think that this is one of the worst ones. Like, let's start with the big one, right? I think the elephant in the room is Bradley Beal and his contract.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that is the worst contract extension signing of the season, of this offseason. Like, whatever you think of Bradley Beal, anybody listening, watching this later on right now currently, Bradley Beal is not as good as the contract he just received is. And I don't really care what anybody has to say about it. Like, I watch enough of this sport to know deep down that Bradley Beal is not a number one player on a winning team. Just is not. Historically, that type of player at the level that he is does not lead to winning championships. It never has. And in his best season that he's ever had, which was 2 seasons ago, he was the scoring leader for the league. I think he scored like 30.2 points per game or something like that. Even then it was ugly. That team was like the worst team in the league that season. So people get so caught up on stat lines nowadays. One of the very few examples, I would say, Bernie, of you have a guy that's an all-NBA player, and people would always say, oh, you have to re-sign that guy. Whether or not you like it, you have to do it. I would argue you didn't have to do it. You probably shouldn't have done it. Now, first, you're stuck with him. Like, a perfect example, like a perfect world, he asks for a trade in 6 months, has the best first half of the season he's ever had, and they get a huge package in return for him. That's the best result of this situation they've put themselves in. I just don't think that's going to happen, man. No. I just don't. Now, think of the teams that have always been rumored to be in these trades for Beal. The Celtics are not trading for Bradley Beal on that contract. I don't think they are. I would be astounded by that. I just don't think they're a dumb enough team to trade for that contract. And if they're not in the situation between him and Tatum and all the rumors for years, I mean, who's in for Beal with that contract?
No one.
Nobody. So now you're stuck with a 50+ million a year guy who doesn't raise your ceiling at all past what it is. So I would put this as the second worst offseason currently, right ahead of Charlotte in terms of second to worst, and right behind Brooklyn in terms of Brooklyn could be much worse, and they're terrible, but at least they have Kevin Durant and Kyrie still signed to their team. This team's terrible. And Johnny Davis looked atrocious in Summer League, and I don't think that means a lot, like, long-term. If Johnny Davis is good, he's going to be good. If he's bad, he's going to be bad. The league is not indicative most of the time of that, but he was really bad in a summer league to the point where you have to be a little bit concerned. So I hated this offseason on all accounts. I think they're terrible.
Yeah, definitely was not a great offseason. Let us know, Wizards fans, what do you think about it? Is it one of the worst off seasons in the NBA? Let us know in the comment section down below. I think it's a little better than
Bradley Beal got the Kyler Murray contract of NBA basketball.
He did. All right, let's move on to the last team, the Utah Jazz. They obviously are in the news for big reasons. Obviously they got Simeone Fontecchio. I think he's Italian. He's an Italian. They got Malik Beasley. They got Patrick Beverley. They got Leandro Bolmaro. They got Jared Vanderbilt via the draft. They got Kessler. They lost Rudy Gobert to a trade. Hancho Hernan Gomez, the actor himself, I believe he's on a different team. I'm not sure what team he's on now.
Just signed to a team today. Who was it? Here, I'll find it while you keep talking.
He signed to a team. You got Daniel House Jr., who they lost, and Royce O'Neal, who they traded away to the Nets. This, to me, I mean, if I want to troll, I'd probably say that this was a championship offseason, just because they've got rid of players. But I would say that this is a good offseason, more so from the fact that maybe I'm changing definitions of teams and things like that. This was a good offseason from the fact that, actually, you know what? No, I can't do that. It is probably a solid offseason, just on the fact that they got rid of Rudy Gobert and got a huge buttload in return. You have to like that as a Jazz fan. Again, the Jazz are never going to attract free agents. I don't care if Dwayne Wade is the owner. I don't even care if LeBron James himself is the owner of the Utah Jazz. He owns them just by playing the game that he does. I think the Utah Jazz, they need to build from the draft, and they're probably going to do it the right way. Try to get this kid, Victor Wembanyama. I keep bringing his name up. Again, we will have something coming out relatively soon about him. Like I said, in week 1 or week 2 in August. So be on the lookout for that. But again, I thought, to me, the Utah Jazz, it was solid just by getting rid of guys and really blowing this team up and starting over fresh.
Juancho signed for the Raptors today.
That's what it was. Nice. The Six.
I'm going to push back on what you just said. I actually think you were in the right spot originally. Maybe not the championship troll, but I think it was a good. I think this is a really good offseason.
Okay.
Yeah, I really do.
I'll move it up for you.
Here's the thing. Realistically, there's no way they could have brought back the team they had last season. There's just literally no chance they could have done that. There was no positive that could have been gleamed from bringing Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert back.
Mm-hmm.
This is where it starts to get good, right? Who got the biggest return of all time? Is it bigger than the Anthony Davis trade? Was it bigger on paper? Because I would argue that the Pelicans got better stuff in return. But just on like an asset to asset, how much was returned for Rudy Gobert? I think it was more, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Gobert is not worth as much as they got in return for him. So you have to give them a big plus right away.
Yeah.
I would be genuinely shocked if Donovan Mitchell plays a minute for this team next season. I'd be very, very, very surprised. If you add that into consideration, I mean, they're going to get another historic borderline return for him, right? Which puts them in the best position asset-wise in the whole league.
Yeah.
The Thunder, and I would argue that their situation is better than the Thunder, because even the players that they got in return for Rudy, on top of all the picks, are worth things.
Yeah.
Beasley is worth something. Patrick Beverley is worth something. Jared Vanderbilt is probably worth a first to some teams in the league. I bet they get a first for him eventually. If they do that and they make all these moves, they run out this garbage team for one season, they can rebuild through the draft one season more than we've ever seen a team do. And I really think that seems to be what the plan is. Going into the draft that we're going to have next season, it's the best move to make. They had no chances to sign anybody that would make their team better. Donovan Mitchell doesn't raise your floor if he's alone. He really doesn't. He can't play defense like at the level you want him to do that. So, I mean, this is it's almost a bigger dub for Danny Ainge than anything else. Like, he is, and I'm not going to be one of the guys that just thinks he's a god no matter what. Like, I think he I'm also not going to be one of the guys that says he ruins basketball. I think that he's just really good at his job. He's really good at getting value in return for the players that he can't keep on his team or doesn't want to keep on his team. And when it comes down to it, no one is going to have a better chance to get Victor Wembanyama than this team. Nobody, as of this moment right now, has a better chance to get him. On paper, he is the best prospect since you want to come up with. Literally anybody you want to name. He's the best prospect since them. I think everybody wants to say, like, people, because people will put out the headline or whatever our video is going to be called, whatever it is. It's always the best prospect since Zion, since LeBron, since Kevin Durant, whatever it is, right? This is one of the very few situations, I would argue, where all of it is justified. I mean, Victor Wembanyama is a freak. If you position yourself as a squad to end up with that guy, and you have no other hope to be a decent team anyways, I say you're doing the right thing. That's just me. And I think anybody's doing a better job of it right now than Utah. So I would say this is a big win for them. I think they've had a great offseason.
Yeah, for sure. And let us know in the comment section down below, what did you guys make of our tier list? Are you guys in agreement? Do you disagree? Let us know in the comment section down below. Again, I do appreciate Pete. I know I'm on borrowed time right here, so I do appreciate you tuning in, and Pete for helping out on this channel and helping finish this list.
Brother, man. Pleasure.
But he does have to go, and so I will respect his time at that sense. So again, I do appreciate you guys for tuning into the channel. Please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Again, we're on the road to 2K. Let us know, leave your comments and opinions in the comment section down below. I will also be breaking down each individual team. Be on the lookout for that this coming week. We'll break them down, talk about the teams probably from the order that we just did it, from the first team that we did to the last team. So make sure you guys are paying attention to when your team will come up. But nevertheless, thank you once again for tuning here to The Charge, bringing the latest NBA news and rumors and also basketball opinions. Please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button if you're new to the channel. And again, we'll catch you guys on the next video. Unless, Pete, you got something else to say?
Good, man. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.
All right, everybody. We'll catch you on the next video. Peace out, everybody.
Peace.